You know the old saying, it's always darkest in the middle of the Republican National Convention. Hi, I'm Scott Ott, and this episode of Bill Whittle Now is brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. And Bill, the word dark is the one that kept recurring in headlines that I saw of coverage of the first couple of hours, basically, the first few hours of the Republican National Convention. One story referred to the message as dark warnings about the Biden presidency. Another said that it had a dark message. The term dire was also used. And basically, these dire warnings had to do with the prospect of Joe Biden becoming president of the United States. And according to the Associated Press, anyway, the speakers at the Republican National Convention falsely accused Biden of things like backing defund the police movements, or intending to ban fracking, or taking over healthcare at the federal level, or opening our borders, or raising taxes on most Americans. Bill, I didn't get my copy of the memo. Perhaps you got it faxed over to you that said that the term we're supposed to use to describe the rhetoric among the RNC speakers is dark. What do you make of this?
Well, I did get the memo, but the toner was maladjusted. I couldn't read it. It was too dark.
You don't have the heat-sensitive paper that
it just came out pretty much almost black. You barely make out the letters at all.
It's a very dark message.
Obviously, well, there's two things to say, I think, that come to mind immediately. First of all, everybody knows, because he said so, that Joe Biden is going to spend trillions on the so-called green economy, that he does want to stop fracking. He did contribute to funds that got Antifa protesters and Black Lives Matter protesters out of jail on bail. He clearly, all of the things that they accused Donald Trump of darkly insinuating, and falsehoods, by the way, we all know they're true. But that's not the point. We've been dealing with this for forever now. Here's what I think is interesting. What I think is interesting is the media has to lie about what Joe Biden really believes. And what does that tell you about the policies of Joe Biden? What does that tell you? What does it tell you that the Democrats have, at least as long as I've been aware, been forced to basically cover up what they really want to do with something that sounds a lot more like what Americans want? What does that say about their politics? What does it say about their programs? And what does it say about the people who back them? I mean, if you are a writer for the New York Times, and you're living large in New York City, it's probably not going to be too much of a problem for you if they decide to tax the living daylights out of working people in order to have more windmill farms. As long as your electricity stays on, what do you care? And this isolation is what allows the press to support policies like this. But my main point would be all of the things that Donald Trump and the Republicans have talked about are factually based and true, based on what Biden has already said. And if talking about these things is a dark warning, I agree. I don't think I've ever really agreed with the media as much as I agree with them when they say that the threat of a Biden presidency is a dark and dismal warning to America. They got that exactly right.
You know, Bill, it's interesting because you get a whole different story. If you watch the convention itself and listen to some of the speeches, you get one kind of perspective. And then if you read coverage the next day about them, you wonder which speeches someone else got to watch, because they apparently cheated me out of those. But the reporter for the Associated Press says that the speakers attempted to characterize Biden as a vessel for socialists and far-left Democrats, despite his moderate record. Now, that does, Bill, frankly sound loony to people in the Democratic Party, because to them, the progressive, socialist, left-leaning, extremist end of the party is more like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez than Joe Biden. Joe Biden, many people were upset to learn, was the choice rather than Bernie Sanders, because Biden is that middle-of-the-road guy. But it doesn't really matter who the Democrats put up. They're going to be a far-left socialist radical, whether or not they are.
Biden is not a middle-of-the-road guy. Americans don't want the Green New Deal. They've been basically rejecting that ever since this term was invented. They don't want higher taxes. They don't want more restrictions. They don't want more expensive energy by eliminating fracking. They don't want any of this stuff. And when they describe Biden as a moderate, it reminds me very much of a comment I made when I first got to LA and started talking with other conservatives in show business. And I said, the great thing about Hollywood is that it embraces the entire political spectrum from far left on one hand to extreme left on the other. And that's basically where the news is. Now, whether they actually believe it or not is not really relevant. I suspect they probably do believe that Joe Biden is a moderate. But look, Joe Biden is a career politician. Joe Biden has always been where Joe Biden thought was the best place to be. Joe Biden is a cultural plagiarist as well as a literal one. He will be wherever he perceives it is best for Joe Biden. And when all of this radicalization happened during the summer, Joe Biden was there basically front and center with it. All of these proposals that Donald Trump and the Republicans have talked about as being ruinous to the economy are things that Joe Biden has proposed. And so when you get the press basically throwing that kind of shade on the guy, it tells me a great deal, Scott. It tells me that Biden knows and the press knows that the American people do not want what the Democratic Party is selling, and therefore it has to be camouflaged. And to me, this is a source of enormous comfort because they've certainly succeeded in the past with this subterfuge. But
the press says that Biden is winning. You don't think the press really believes that? I mean, that's all the stories. It's how much Biden is up over Trump and how unlikely it is that Trump is going to win. Do you think that the press are putting these stories out there, but they actually think that Biden's going to lose?
I don't know the answer to that question. I know that there are some people who are doing exactly that. Nobody knows what's going to happen until it's over. But I do know that without question, there are people that are inventing polls and using polls of registered voters or people who can spell the word vote or whatever the case may be to show that Biden's up by 9,000 points. And anybody who's serious about this business knows that those things are simply cheerleading. That's all there is to it. But I suspect what most of the case is not so, it's not so much evil. It's just plain stupid. It's just journalists living in the journalist echo chamber, telling each other, along with the rest of the progressives, that the country's doing great and that Biden's doing great, and it's going to be a cakewalk for them. The signs do not indicate that. The cultural signs do not indicate that under any circumstances. But they are going to play this game. Scott, if the media were to admit that Donald Trump was ahead after Biden came out of this convention without a bounce, and Trump probably won't get much of a bounce either. It's just not a year. There were no conventions this year. But if they were to basically admit that Donald Trump is ahead or even close, then it's to concede the game. Everything that it's very easy to understand. The American political system for the last 30 years has had a 30-point headwind against Republicans and a 30-point tailwind for Republicans, 30 percentage points at the
tailwind
ballot.
For Democrats.
Yes, sorry. And so it is, that is the environment, okay? That is the cultural environment that we live in. And because of that, Biden has to be ahead by a huge margin. If they were to admit that it was close, then the actual truth would be you subtract the 30 points away from that and Trump is up by 20. And this is just the reality of the situation. It's the psychology of voting. And what it really is, I think, is a desperate attempt on the part of the Democrats to make sure that Democrats don't just give up now. Because the one thing about this ticket that I've noticed is, and put aside all of the sheer, genuine, righteous anger that any American should have at the entire idea of a political party nominating and then running a candidate who is clearly incapacitated before the election even happens. Put that aside. This is the weakest, the Democratic ticket is the weakest ticket I have seen in my entire life. And people were excited about Bernie Sanders. There were a number of people that were excited about Hillary Clinton. No one is excited about Joe Biden, and there's nothing about Joe Biden, certainly as he exists today, to make them excited. The last person on the earth, the last Democrat to endorse Joe Biden was Barack Obama. What does that tell you, Scott? What does it tell you? It tells me that number one, Obama doesn't want to put his reputation on the line with this clown. Number two, he doesn't think highly of his chances of winning. And number three, he was waiting to see if anybody else was going to be the nominee so he could have a chance to win this thing. Or
number four, Bill, that presidents and people who used to hold the office generally sit out of that process until it's absolutely certain who the nominee is. That's common practice in most parties because they don't want to be seen as interfering in the election of one of their successors.
Okay, well, after Biden had the numbers locked up, it was still months, I think, before Obama did it. And more importantly than the length of time, when Barack Obama endorsed Joe Biden, if you look at the video of him endorsing Joe Biden, it plays exactly as if this was a promotional video for his brother-in-law's pest control company that he promised him that he would do 8 years ago, and has all the enthusiasm of a man who says, let's get this damn thing over with and get it off my back. It is the most dispassionate, robotic, unenthusiastic endorsement I've ever seen. And all of this goes to tell you that Joe Biden, who's middle of the road guy, immediately says, well, we're going to have a woman vice president. Okay. We're going to, and then after George Floyd had to be a black woman. Okay. Who's left? Nobody. So you get Kamala Harris, who black Americans don't like. And now you've got a guy who never had an enthusiastic base. All of Biden's support comes down to the simple fact that most people think he's the guy most likely to beat Trump. But that's not the same thing as enthusiasm for Joe Biden. And enthusiasm is what wins elections. It's not a question of who's phone rings. Oh, I'm going to vote for Biden. Who's going to get out there on election day? Who's going to actually get out there and vote? And to me, there is no enthusiasm on the part of the Democrats, and the Republicans are on fire.
Let's
of course,
finish up
they have to paint it that way.
This episode with a little more dark shade from the Republicans. Mourning in America, MOURNING. This is from Representative Matt Gaetz, a Republican of Florida, who said the Democrats will, quote, disarm you, empty the prisons, lock you in your home, and invite MS-13 to live next door. Bill,
okay, I've got a real problem with that.
The way to talk about a former vice president?
No, I have a major problem with that. He says all this stuff is going to happen, and that's just ridiculous. It's happened already. What a silly thing to say. This has been happening for a decade now. The MS-13 is an international criminal cartel that has been in this country and allowed to be in this country because of Democrats. It's been here for 15, 20 years. Take away your guns. I think that's pretty clear. I think that one of the people on the stage during the Democratic Party debate said, "Oh no, we're coming after your guns. We're not gonna pretend anymore." I didn't see Joe Biden. When Beto O'Rourke said that, I didn't see Joe Biden stand up and say, wait a minute now, hold on. Now we're going too far. I didn't see that. And and as far as locking people in your houses, we all know that if the Democrats win this election on the first Tuesday in November, the COVID-19 crisis will be over on the morning of the first Wednesday in November. And so everything that this guy said has already happened, and to say that, geez, well, what a wacky, nutty, lunatic right-wing nut kind of a prediction is well, you're not paying attention. That's the problem.
Ladies and gentlemen, Bill Whittle and I have been doing this for a long time, initially with another network and now with this at BillWhittle.com. And all of that time, what has borne us aloft and kept us going has been the support of our members. Not only the financial support, but the encouragement, the nice notes that they send from time to time, the great ideas that they have, the ways that they challenge our thinking and inspire us to try harder. All of that comes from people who are dedicated to the cause of liberty and want to see that song of freedom echo around the world. We're grateful to those people. If you're not yet one of them, we invite you to join them and find out what you're missing at BillWhittle.com. There's a big green button that says Become a Member. Go ahead and click that button. For Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks for watching.